Right, everybody, have we got, is there any, this is recording now, have we got any questions about the coursework, first of all? Is everyone getting on okay? Looks like there's a question emerging, is that right? No? You're all okay with that? Good. Right, so today we might not need the full hour, so you might get a little bit more time to continue with the coursework. I'm just going to recap situation awareness for you this morning, and then we're going to do a very short exercise, and you can try one of the situation awareness assessment tools. So is everyone kind of comfortable with the notion of situation awareness now? Yeah, and in particular, the Ensley's model of situation awareness. Now, I quite like the Ensley model. It treats situation awareness as a thing, a state, a kind of product. Okay, so if you remember, it goes through the 3 stages of perception, so perceiving what's going on, comprehension, understanding what's going on, and then projection, predicting what's going on into the future. Okay, so that's the Ensley's model. There is another model which is called the perceptual cycle model. And this model talks more about situation awareness as a process. So the notion that you perceive something from the world, you then compare that against your internal schema, and then you modify your schema based on the understanding of what's happening in the environment. So that looks more of it as a kind of continuous, ongoing thing as you continuously update your model of what's going on in the environment around you. Okay. Now, I quite like, of these two, I would say that Ensley's model is more more common, this one, which is the perception, comprehension, and projection one. Now, I hope you can see that this is a useful model, and you can imagine how this might be used in, for example, nuclear control room design, right? This is all about understanding what's going on around you with a complex system. What we can see is that as jobs and technologies have changed, it may be more difficult to have an awareness of the situation. If we think back to factories 40 years ago, everything was mechanical. Yeah, so it's pretty obvious what's going on in the factory. Is a part coming down the production line? Well, you look and see if it's coming down the production line. Whereas now in factories, there's much more digital technology being used. So a lot more goes on behind the scenes. So, let's look at the technology in this lecture theatre. There's a big box here with a touch screen on it. I don't really understand what's going on beyond the interface. Yeah. Whereas previously we used to have overhead projectors. That was one of the early lecturing technologies. I can remember when I started, one of my first jobs was to do some teaching for Sarah, and she actually handed me a big pile of acetates, which were written on. Said, here you go, here's your lecture. So I used to bring these into a lecture room and lay them on and maybe draw some annotations on it. So it's not that long ago, whereas now everything is software in the room. Yeah, we used to do a lot more writing in lectures. I like that. I think in physics, they still have chalkboards. I like that. It makes me feel very nostalgic. Anyway, I digress. So you see this in lots of different jobs and lots of different scenarios, that things are moving digitally, and therefore we really have to think, does the operator have the information that they need to have an understanding of the situation? Now, I don't need to know everything, right? I don't need to know what's going on behind the system. But if I push a button that says lower the projection screen and nothing happens, then I want to understand what's going on. So the system should communicate to me in that situation what's going on. So yeah, the delays is a really good example of this. If I push the projector on button, projectors usually have a warm-up period, which can take a couple of minutes. So the system should then say to me, system is warming up, right? To give me that feedback. Because if I don't hear anything that's happening or see anything on the interface, I'm going to do that itchy finger thing of turning it on and off and on and off and on and off. And it's not going to like that. It might break the system. Yeah, so that's giving me feedback as to what's happening, improving my situation awareness. So, yeah, like I say, I like the Ensley's model. So one of the points that we got onto in the lecture last week was where these methods are used and how these methods are used. There's quite often sort of a subjective element to this because it is a very cognitive process, and therefore one of the best ways to tap into the operator's brain is to ask them some questions. What's going on for you? There are other methods. So for example, if we're at the design stage, you could look at situation awareness requirements and do a method there. Okay, so the kind of process for that is that you would do interviews with subject matter experts, and then you would do some kind of goal-oriented task analysis. So a very common approach to this is hierarchical task analysis, where you look at the overall goal. So that might be monitor and maintain safe running of a nuclear power plant. And then you decompose that into, monitor the reactor core, monitoring the cooling loop, monitoring the overflow system, and then you decompose that further and further until you've got unit-sized tasks that you can then analyze and say, to do this subtask, what info does the operator need and when? Okay, so that would be useful at the design stage. And again, designing a nuclear control room, yeah, you could do this. You could do a task analysis and then work out what information is needed when. Now, another type of assessment method is what's called freeze probe investigations of situation awareness. So these will typically use a simulator, and then the simulator screen goes blank at some point, and then the operator is asked questions about their situation awareness. So again, this may have use for nuclear control room design. Can anyone think, though, if you're applying this technique, what might be a challenge of using this in the design of a nuclear control room? Well, one thing is that you would need a simulation of a nuclear control room. Yeah, and that's not easy to generate. If you want the operator to do this task, you need a simulation that may or may not be ready available. We see much more use of simulation, again, in all kinds of application areas. So you may have heard the term digital twin being used, which is, that tends to be a real life replica of an existing plant, but you could use that to do a SAGAT approach, where you freeze the digital twin and do the situation awareness. The simulation of a factory before it's been built is fairly common, but the level of fidelity of that simulation may or may not be appropriate to do this kind of situation awareness requirements analysis. So here are some of the limitations of SAGAT. So it requires a simulator, as we've discussed already. The queries are intrusive to the primary task. So because you interrupt the operator and then query them about their situation awareness, that's going to be intrusive to the task, isn't it? If you remember, we looked at task switching costs during the exercise that we ran when I was pinging you on Teams and you were doing Sudoku. Yeah, there's a cost to interrupting the task. And that would be the same here if you freeze the task to run these probes. So the pausing is disruptive, limited applicability in the real world. So what that point means here is that if somebody is in control of a nuclear control room, you're not going to blindfold them and say, stop looking at the task and answer my situation awareness queries. Right? That's not safe. That wouldn't be appropriate to do. And also SAGAT, like many of the situation awareness requirements assessment techniques, is generally not suitable for team situation awareness. So again, what we see in jobs now is that the knowledge required to do the job is generally held amongst multiple actors and even held within the technology. But among those among those actors, the SA may be partly in person A, partly in person B, partly in person C. And SAGAT doesn't have a mechanism to look across these people to make sure the situation awareness is appropriate as a team. Okay, and that's quite an important point. The sharing may also be over time. So let's think about a shift change where person A goes off, their shift is over, person B comes on. How does that situational awareness translate from one to the other? The SAGAT is very individual, so you'd have to do it for each person. So there's another classification of situation awareness analysis approaches, which is observer-based techniques. So here somebody could watch somebody doing a task, and then an expert could make a judgment on whether that person is demonstrating behaviors which indicates situation awareness or not. So a good example of this would be a driving instructor. So I remember when I was doing my lessons, the instructor was watching me to see if I was looking in the mirrors to take in information about what was going on the road around me. So that's an example of an observable indicator of a situation awareness. Can anyone think of what's the problem with that kind of an approach? Yes.
Not sure what.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a really good point. So the problem is that the situation awareness is a very cognitive phenomenon. What I do with my eyes may not link to what I do with my brain. How many of you are sitting here looking at the screen but thinking about other things, for example? I dare say one or two maybe. But it's the same in a job. Yeah, you may look at something but not perceive it, or not comprehend it, or not think about the future. And so that's very difficult then. That can impact on somebody watching you to try and guess your situation awareness. Okay. So that was not on the slide, those observer rating techniques. Another one is SART. So SAGAT is probably the most commonly used measure of situation awareness, certainly the most famous measure of situation awareness. But it does rely on this simulator and freezing the simulator, which is often not available. SART is a kind of another fairly commonly used technique, situation awareness rating technique, which is usually done after the task. So it's a retrospective method. Can anyone think of what the limitation of a retrospective method might be? Yes. Don't remember. That's right. So you don't remember, or again, thinking back to material that you've already learned on this module, your memory may be affected by the subsequent questioning of the task. So if you think, for example, about a variable level of situation awareness, may start out great, you understand what's going on, you're happy, you're predicting into the future, your situation may deteriorate during the middle of a task, something complicated happens, your situation awareness may then recover towards the end of the task. At that point, we ask you the SAGAT. So we ask you questions about your situation awareness, and you've forgotten about that bit in the middle where things were particularly difficult. Okay, so that's one of the problems of a retrospective situation awareness. Now, SART has three categories: demands on attentional resources, supply of attentional resources, and understanding of the situation awareness. And what it does is it can calculate an overall SA figure based on a small algorithm that puts these things, that works out an overall SA score. And we're going to give it a go. So this slide shows these various considerations. So within the demand, it's the instability of the situation, the complexity of the situation, and the variability of the situation. Within the attentional supply, it's arousal. So how much are you putting into the task? You're concentrating. Are you focusing on the task? You divided. Is your attention elsewhere? And spare mental capacity. So how much spare mental capacity do you have while doing the task? Now, actually, this kind of makes me think of another limitation of the SART approach. If I was to ask you now how much spare mental capacity you have, would you be able to answer me accurately? Yeah, it's a difficult thing to answer that, isn't it? And then here we have under understanding, the information quantity, the amount of information, the quality, how good it is, and how familiar you are with the situation. Okay, so these are the rating points for SART. So what I thought it might be quite fun to do is to do a task. So what I want you to do is to link onto this hotel management game. So if you access the slides, you should be able to link through to this. If I can find my cursor, I'll be able to show it to you as well. Now, you shouldn't need to enter any kind of details or anything like that. It's just an online game. Now, the only problem is that my one will have, I think it saves my status. So what you see won't be the same as what I see. I'm coming round. What do you say? Ah, 17 seconds of advert. Sorry, everyone. Be there in a minute. Okay, still loading. Yeah, right. So here's the hotel game with the catchy tune. I want you all to play this. Yours won't look like mine, like I say, because mine's been running in the background and I've now got 900 million. Nope. Yeah. 900,000 million coins. I can't quite tell. But anyway, what you want to also do is you can change how much money all your objects produce. And you can change how quickly your objects produce money. So I'm going to let you spend a few minutes playing this, and then we're going to try the SART. If you can't access it, you can just watch me. I like playing it. Good fun that this is my job, isn't it? Finding these games for you guys to play with. Yeah. Is there anything else I can do? Have I got a new room? Who's that guy? Can't get any money out of him. Has anyone managed to load this? Oh, get the bird. Got it. Has anyone else managed to load this? Yeah, you having a go at it? Right, I'll give you a couple more minutes then and we'll move on. Sorry, I'm just checking to see if we've got any queries at home. Nope. Right then, I think we should come back to reality. And yeah, it's fun, isn't it? What I would like you to do now is to click on this link from the PowerPoint, and then that should take you through to this form, which has got the categories of the SART rating scale. Now, what I would like you to do is treat this as low as number 1 and high as 6, okay? What I want you to do is, as you go through, take a note of your scores, and then we're going to go back and we're going to calculate the situation awareness score. Okay, so just keep a note of, you know, if you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10, so you can just write 1 to 10 or whatever. But just keep a note of the numbers that you put in for each of these as you yeah, you don't need to do the form. You can just take a note using these headers. We're not going to use the results from the form itself. All right, so then so assuming you've done your scores, what I would like you then to do then is to work out your average score for demand, your average score for attentional supply, and then your average score for understanding. So obviously add them up for demand and divide by 3, add them up and divide by 4 for supply, and add them up and divide by 3 for understanding. You didn't expect to do any maths this morning, did you? It's okay, you can use your phone calculator or whatever. So work out your average score for each of these sections. Okay, and then the final task, once you've done that, is to use the formula that is written in the header to work out your SART situation awareness score. So what you do is you take your, well, we'll start off, we'll do it properly. So subtract your attentional supply from the demand, that's D minus S, and then that figure you subtract from understanding. Okay, good. So what was your situation awareness score? Who's calculated it? Mine was 1.17. Anybody calculated their score yet? We're not moving on until I start hearing some situation awareness scores. Yeah, of course. So it's up there in the title. So demand minus supply, and then you take that figure away from understanding. I'm just going to answer a query from Teams while we're doing this. I just need to remind myself of which email it was that is being referred to. So Jael, I'm sorry, I can't remember this email. Could you please give me some more detail? Okay, sorry, okay, you're talking about the Wickens book. Which chapter will be useful for the coursework? So that's a good question. The answer is really the whole book, but I don't expect you to read the whole book for the coursework. So I would recommend that you choose whichever chapter aligns with what area that you're focusing on for the coursework. Because it's a big book, there's a lot of complex information in there. So have a look through and just pull out the material that you think is relevant. Right, have we got any situation awareness scores? 4.5, okay, good, pretty high. So did you feel like you understood what was going on in that task then? Yeah, okay, good. Any other scores? 8, oh my goodness. Did you feel like you were in control and understanding when you were in the task? Yeah? Okay, pretty good. Any other scores? Mine was a paltry 1.1. What's happening? It's not that complicated, is it? Are you getting distracted or what's going on here?
I got 5.6.
5.6, okay, another good high score. Right, let us move on. Oh, thank you, online. Yeah, 1.6, about the same as mine. So we see quite a lot, really, of variability in the scores. So the next slide was really thinking about the pros and cons of the SART. Okay, so you've just done this questionnaire. It's pretty easy, right? Yeah, I mean, you seem to struggle a little bit on the maths, but you can imagine going into a workplace and being able to administer this quite readily with the operators. Yeah, wait for them to finish a task and then give them the SART questionnaire. So here we have a validated method. So you're not just making this up. You're not just saying to them, hey pal, how was your situation awareness? Yeah, we've got a greater level of formality than that. And you can reference the paper where this questionnaire came from. So the SART is also applicable across a range of applications. That's a good point that I failed to mention about the SAGAT. SAGAT was originally from aerospace, so pilots. So you need to check if it's applicable, if it's generalizable to your own domain. And SART is a widely used method as well. So that is advantageous because what that means then is you'll be able to find research which has situation awareness scores from other applications, and you can then compare your SART essay score to findings of other people's, so you can check whether your findings are okay or not based on that other work. So thinking of the cons of this method now, it is possible to confuse situation awareness with performance. I think this is a really big point in that part of situation awareness is knowing how much of the situation you understand. But of course, you don't know what you don't know. So what I'm talking about here is it's difficult to comprehend which bits of the task you don't have an understanding of because you simply don't know. Yeah, there may be something important that you're not recognizing, you're not comprehending, you're not thinking about, you're not aware of. We've spoken again about retrospective. Is the memory accuracy? Is your memory accurate? An alternative would be to administer it during the task. So either in a probe approach or simply while the operator is doing their job, getting them to complete these 10 questions. Again, that's going to be intrusive, isn't it? You wouldn't want to do that to someone driving a train or a car, as it may interfere with the task. And also, I think, again, another fairly important limitation of SART is that it doesn't have anything on projection. Yeah, none of the questions, I think, related directly to, are you thinking about what's happening next? There's a question on instability of the situation, but that's slightly different to projecting, isn't it? So I think that is an omission of SART. Anything else you would like to comment on for SART? I'm guessing not. You seem quite a sleepy bunch this morning. So I think what we'll do then is we'll conclude the lecturing part of the session. What I will do now is answer any questions from the coursework. Any more questions? Yes?
It's not about the coursework, it's about that last slide.
Yep.
You said it's retrospective. So like, you're doing half the task, so why is it also intrusive?
So I think the point is it's only intrusive if it's administered during the task. So the more common way is to do it afterwards. But if you decide, for example, that your operator's on an 8-hour shift and you would prefer to do it during the task, in that situation, it would then become intrusive on what the operator is doing.
Yeah, I guess.
That help clarify?
Yeah, cheers.
Any other questions? Yes.
For the coursework, so like, obviously we could include stuff like up to this point. Does it matter if we don't include sort of like something from all of the topics? It's like I think Logan's already finished it, but then obviously we can include stuff like from this lecture or whatever.
So you absolutely do not need to include everything that's been covered up until this point. So I want you to choose your own focus for the coursework. Yeah, so go into areas that you think are relevant. The topic is too broad to cover everything anyway. So I think, you know, by all means, pick a certain area and focus on that. The one thing to check is, you know, you've got a bit of time, so go back over the marking criteria and check you've assessed that. As mentioned, when I release the coursework, I will literally open that spreadsheet and choose which box you fall into for your assignment. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to remind you of is that the university has an extenuating circumstances process. So if any of you are affected by circumstances beyond your control, which are impacting your ability to submit on time, then talk to your personal tutor and think about that EC process as well. If you have support plans as well, I'm not very clear on the process there, but talk to your personal tutor in the first instance. All right, any more questions? Good, right, I'm going to see you online on Friday. You may have seen I've posted on Teams, we've got Sarah's session coming up. So if there's anything you'd like Sarah to talk about, or if there's any of these concepts you'd like Sarah to go over, then please let me know before the session so I can pre-warn Sarah. All right, great. Thank you very much, everyone.